Hey guys, Kevin Plowy here, and I'm very happy to be back in New York City hosting the Build series, where it is finally stopped raining. I thought I was going to say until I looked outside, and it's definitely going to rain again, so we're all getting soaked on our way home. But I digress. Operation Finale is the gripping true story of Israeli spies' covert mission to capture Adolf Eichmann, Nazi architect of the final solution after he fled to Argentina at the end of World War II. And what a story it is. Here to talk about it today are two very handsome and talented gentlemen, director Chris Weitz and actor Nick Kroll. And we're going to bring them out in just a minute, but first, here's a look at Operation Finale in theaters August 29th.
You have no interest in what I have to say. Unless it confirms what you think you already know. My job was simple. Save the country I love from being destroyed. Is your job any different?
I have a lead on a great enemy of our people.
Adolf Eichmann.
The architect of the final solution?
The trail went cold in '46. Latest intelligence suggests Buenos Aires.
This guy convinced rabbis to load the trains themselves, and not by force.
If it is him, we need an elite crew.
I'm not joining your hit squad.
I would happily put a bullet in between his eyes, but that's not what we're doing here.
This is strictly catch and extract.
Eichmann will stand trial here in Israel.
Think what it means. Finally, publicly, holding to account the man who organized our slaughter.
Our memory reaches back through recorded history. The book of memory still lies open. And you, here now, are the hand that holds the pen. If you succeed, for the first time in our history, we will judge our executioner. And we will warn off any who may wish to follow his example. If you fail, he escapes justice. Perhaps forever. I beg you, do not fail.
All right, give it up for Nick Kroll and Chris Weitz in the building. What is going on, guys?
Yes, it's the laugh riot of the summer.
Yeah, well, Nick, you were just here, I think, for Uncle Drew.
Yes, very similar films.
Like the same movie. I think you're being pigeonholed in Hollywood. This is what's happening.
For sure.
Yes.
Yes, I was here. We were, Uncle Drew is a basketball movie with a bunch of NBA guys in old man makeup.
Yeah.
And this is a movie about the capture of Adolf Eichmann. And very similar.
Very
tonally, I was asked to do similar things throughout.
Chris, have you been to Build before, or is this your first time?
This is my first time. What are we building?
Welcome. We're building live internet programming as we speak. Yeah. Guys, I really enjoyed this movie. It is powerful and entertaining. Which I think is just a hallmark of great film, of great cinema. Keeps you engaged from the very first reel to the end.
Excellent.
And what an incredible true story this is. So incredible that this is one of those films you watch and you wonder, how come I didn't know this story before? And how come Hollywood has never told it in a major motion picture like this? I mean, We've seen 27 Spider-Man reboots. Not that I won't watch every single one of those, but never this story told on the screen. Were you guys surprised when this project came to you and you realized that you had that responsibility to tell it for the first time?
Yeah, I don't think we get to make these kinds of movies for the big screen anymore. I mean, your Spider-Men. And I think they're called the Revengers.
Close.
Take up a lot of screens. So it was amazing to get the chance to put this up. it is a pretty extraordinary story. Some of the craziest things that happened are actually true as opposed to made up. Like the fact that Adolf Eichmann, who had changed his name, didn't change his son's name, and his son started dating a girl who didn't know she was Jewish.
Right.
And her father, when she brought home her new boyfriend, realized that this was the son of a mass murderer. That is true, and seems completely like something out of a Hollywood film. And the story is rife with these really bizarre but dramatic twists.
Nick, were you familiar with this slice of history? What was your attitude?
I was familiar with it for a few reasons. One, my father works in the corporate intelligence world and worked with a guy whose name was Avraham Shalom, who was one of the men who was part of the capture of Eichmann. He's not featured in the film, but was one of the team members. So growing up, I knew the story because I knew that it was that my dad knew this guy. I would brag about it. The other reason I knew about this story more recently was I was asked to do a drunk history about this particular story, which Rachel Bloom did this past season, and I got an email about it. I wasn't able to do it for scheduling, and then like a week later, I got an email about this movie, and I was like, I already passed on this. I can't do it. And then it was a very different version of it.
Like sober history.
Yeah, exactly. Well, clearly a very cosmic connection going on. Is your father still with us? Has he seen the movie?
Yes, he has seen the film, and he'll be at the premiere as well. But he saw it and really loved it. And both my parents, and I think as growing up as like a Jewish kid in America, this is one of those stories that, at least for me growing up, was one of these tales of heroism and retribution and justice that coming out of the Holocaust. It's one of the stories that felt like it felt like a victory in a lot of ways. But what's amazing about this movie and the way that Chris handled the material is you realize it was a victory, but it was one rife with questions of morality and questions of right and wrong and how one goes about seeking retribution for crimes.
Yeah. There's a very potent scene in this film where at one point the operatives are all sitting around a table. I think your character's on the piano, and they're talking about all of the family members, really tragically tallying up the family members that they lost during the Holocaust. What kind of, as Jewish Americans, what kind of responsibility was this for you guys to bring this story to the screen?
Well, I think there's always a responsibility to try to remind people that this happened, not just, however, for the benefit of Jewish Americans or people who might be the target of anti-Semitism, but to know that Germany wasn't unique in this regard, that it can happen anywhere, and it won't necessarily be Jews the next time who are targeted. It's really an unfortunate fact that demagogues can take advantage of all kinds of social anxiety to direct anger towards an other, no matter who they might be, and to use that to gain political power. And I think one of the interesting things about Eichmann was that in some ways he would have been a normal person under normal circumstances. This guy wasn't a psychopath or a leering villain when he started out. He was someone who was ambitious and a careerist and found opportunities in this new movement and ended up doing horrific things.
Yeah, and that's another thing I appreciated about the movie. You know, as difficult as it is to sort of come to terms with as you're watching it, you understand that this is a real man who was put in some very difficult circumstances. You sort of are questioning his morality throughout the course of it, but this movie makes you see him above and beyond everything is a human first, and of course, you know, in large part due to an amazing performance by Sir Ben Kingsley, who I want to talk about in a minute. But another thing the film does is it really shines a light on this, not only this specific event, but this specific time in history. Because you always hear that after World War II, the members of the SS brass who did escape. Escape to South America, to countries like Argentina. We never see this portrayed on film or television. I can't remember. And the way the story sort of characterizes their role. They not only welcome the SS, but they seem to kind of embrace them, aid them in their cause. What did you learn about that time in history and in that culture that again, like this is so little known?
Right. Well, fascism didn't start in Germany as a political movement. It started in Italy, and it had cousins all around the world. One of the places was Argentina, which would remain neutral in the war until the last day of the war, on which they declared war on Germany in order to make it easier for German money and citizens to escape to Argentina. And they were quite happy, especially in the struggle against communism, which is sort of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, to import these guys who had tremendous experience with building up industry and with logistics. A man like Eichmann was, what he did was to organize on a mass scale the movement of people. He did it in the service of something terribly evil, but he was a very skilled specialist at what he did.
When you watch a lot of movies, maybe too many movies, like myself, you find yourself constantly comparing, and I mean this is a total compliment, but this film reminded me of Munich, of Argo. I'm curious to know, were there films or filmmakers that influenced your approach on it? I
mean, I think that those are two great examples. I think Spielberg is amazing at making popular and exciting these really gnarly historical issues, and Munich was one of those films. Bridge of Spies being another. I think Argo sort of hung over our heads because, in the third act of our movie, we've got some guys who've got to escape from an airport on a plane. Right. And I was like, God damn it, Argo. But I thought, like, Argo kind of stole it from us in reverse time order because this took place in 1960 and Argo took place in the 1980s. So I feel okay about that, actually.
Yeah, just in regards to that, I think specifically with me, because I had not seen Munich. I maybe had watched it at some point, but I watched it while we were shooting just to see what other like C-list filmmakers like Steven Spielberg were doing with it. Right. But it was interesting realizing chronologically that's happening later in the process of how Israel was dealing with Nazis and war criminals and people who were their enemies, and this was in the early stages of Israel figuring out what they were going to do, how they were going to respond. This being Ben Gurion, the prime minister of Israel at the time, was like, "We're going to get Eichmann, we're going to bring him, we're going to have him stand trial, and then we're going to move forward because we can't stay focused on that time in our lives anymore." So it's interesting to see how it happened chronologically.
Nick, you are best known for your comedic work.
Do you do comedy?
You've done a few over the years.
Podcast.
Yes, maybe a comedic genius. Somebody once said. I just said it right here. Hashtag Kroll Show. But Nick, we have seen you do some drama before. A couple of years ago, you were in an excellent drama called Loving about the landmark Supreme Court case around interracial marriage. Another major drama for you here. What has that transition been like for you thus far?
I'm basically, if you need a Jew in the 60s, I'm your guy.
So you are being pigeonholed, is what you're telling us.
I may be pigeonholed in that space. Or I may be pigeonholed in, like, what would my family had liked me to do in real life, would be an ACLU lawyer or a member of the Mossad. I love kind of doing a variety of things, comedy being the way in for me. But I've always wanted to be able to act in different kinds of films, and it takes visionary directors like Chris to decide to hire someone like me. For any of us to be able to do what we want to do is a joy and a privilege. But then you don't want to be limited to be doing this one thing that you're kind of known for. And it takes the trust of a filmmaker to say, like, all right, people can watch you and not expect a joke out of you every minute. And then hopefully you can do the job, help tell the story. And so I am very grateful to Chris and Jeff Nichols who cast me in Loving, that they sort of took a flyer on letting me show and do other things besides just comedy.
There is some levity, of course, to this story. There are plenty of funny moments, and especially given that, are there moments where you found yourself having to, on both these films, I guess I should say, having to resist like throwing out a one-liner at an inopportune time?
Well, my character weirdly is sort of a little bit of the levity of the film.
Yeah.
His relationship with Oscar Isaac's character, they're friends, and they sort of give each other the business, like friends do, and men who have been in and women who've been in war together. You have to find levity in places. So, in a way, I'm positioned in the film to have lighter moments occasionally, and Oscar's incredible. He's an incredible actor, but he's actually very funny, and can do the comedy and sort of thread that needle. So, I think we were aware of when those moments were where you could be a little lighter, and people use comedy in tense moments to break it up or to make a point, and I think Chris was not afraid to sort of allow those moments to play out.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's easier for people who start in comedy to do drama than the other way around. I think comedy embraces more of the range of human life than drama does at times, because sometimes you see a drama and it's as though nobody ever has any joy or humor in their lives whatsoever, and that's the medicinal thing that we're supposed to take so we can be miserable. And you see, that's thunder. Sorry, but it's true. And I actually there's a test screening of the movie where suddenly the audience was just yucking it up like every 10 seconds. Like,
and you're like, what have I made?
Yeah, I thought we're going off the rails here, people. Let's cry a bit.
Well, we've got to point out that you also have a background in comedy. You behind a couple of great contemporary classic comedies, American Pie, About a Boy, and I think your resume as a whole, amazingly eclectic. Not only those comedies, you directed a Twilight movie, Golden Compass. You wrote a Star Wars movie. How much are you trying to find something new to do with every film? Because if you look at your filmography, it's no two film is alike. It's almost like that's a very conscious effort on your side.
It is conscious because it takes a year at least to make a film, and so I never want to make the same film twice. And usually at the end of making a movie, I'm mentally and physically exhausted, and I say, "Well, I'm not going to do that again." And so it takes something in some other genre or format or something to get me back out there.
You guys mentioned Oscar Isaac, impossibly handsome, possibly charming lead of this movie. Tell us more about working with that guy.
He's okay looking.
He's all right. Yeah.
It's pretty great. I mean, when you're hoping to cast somebody in a role like that, you really just hope that they're not an asshole, and you won't have to spend a year trying to pretend that you don't hate them.
Tell us more. Who?
I think I can swear on the internet, but and Oscar is a fantastic guy, right? He's someone who you'd want to hang out with anyway. That's a great point to start with, and then he's also sort of organically an actor who can't put his foot wrong. Everything comes. That's, I think, his particular genius is making everything work as though it came out of the character's mouth and out of his mind very, very naturally. So it's fantastic to work with somebody like that. You feel like you kind of can't go wrong.
Yeah, and as someone who I'd met him very briefly a few years earlier, I believe I called him at an award ceremony Pocket Clooney, which when I met him, he was like, "Yeah, we met before. You called me Pocket Clooney," and I was like, "Oh right, yeah, sorry about that." But I meant it as a compliment because it is true.
It kind of implies that he's physically small.
Yeah, but then he's larger than life, though.
No, it's true.
Like George Clooney.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
But he's such one. He, as Chris said, a great guy, a wonderful person to spend time with. So smart. He's a producer on the film, and so he was as the actors go, he was really the quarterback of what we were doing, and just so smart and really kind of making making himself and for everybody to understand why everyone was saying and doing what they were doing in every scene. And for me, as someone who is not as experienced in this space, to be able to watch and learn from him and talk to him about his process and what he was doing was incredibly helpful to me as an actor, besides the fact that he was just a very generous guy. He is the star of this film. He's such a down-to-earth dude that he was also just a pleasure to be around, and just a fantastic actor.
Of course, these days also known as Poe Dameron from the Star Wars movies. Chris, you were one of the writers on Rogue One, which I referenced earlier. Did you guys trade Star Wars tales?
You know, you're sort of not allowed to. You've signed NDAs up to the wazoo, so I can't even ask him what's going on in the next one, actually. Although I did say, hey, man, why did you, keep on messing up in Last Jedi? You wanted to, always go on the attack. Come on, get it together.
Right.
And he apologized for that.
Good.
For messing with Laura Dern, which he shouldn't have done.
Good.
I mean, no, it's funny to have both been through the kind of Star Wars ringer. And a ringer in a way just because, we grew up with this stuff and care about it so much that it is a wonderful responsibility, but also a stressful one.
And I've watched a lot of Storage Wars.
So you're an expert. We've talked about Nick Kroll's range. We've talked about Oscar Isaac's range. Let's talk about Sir Ben Kingsley's range. This is a guy who has played maybe the most peaceful man who's ever walked the lands in Gandhi, and here he's playing the architect of the final solution.
Yeah.
What kind of gravitas does a knight like Ben Kingsley bring to a set like this?
An acting knight.
Yes.
He's not only played Gandhi, of course, but he also was in Schindler's List.
Right.
He's played Simon Wiesenthal, the famed Nazi hunter. He, amongst all the actors in the world, he's probably thought more seriously about the Holocaust than anybody. So, but he hadn't played someone on this side of the equation. I think it was a very sort of emotionally challenging thing for him to do, to engage with this kind of figure. Everyone who came across Eichmann in the mission itself felt very strange to be around this kind of nexus of evil. And that's not to say that he was very obviously a villain. In fact, at times he appeared all too human and frail. He was a deeply manipulative character as well. And so I think Sir Ben brings this incredible intelligence to the proceedings. And he also scared the crap out of all of us, certainly when he first arrived, because he was not in the mood to make friends. He didn't see it as his job to kind of high-five everybody and then suddenly turn on a dime into this Nazi war criminal. But when he first arrived, he was very kind of forbidding and not wanting to engage in the usual small talk about what they had for breakfast. He gradually warmed, and that was great as he sort of settled into the role. But I think he put all of us on notice when he arrived.
I once pissed off Sir Ben at a junket. One of the most terrifying moments of my life.
I bet.
Just that glare.
What happened? Did you?
I was trying to do a bit with him, and it was called the perks of being a sir, and I was being a little light with it. For some reason, I had in my mind that he was okay to joke around about that, but he takes it very seriously. And once I asked him a few sort of lightweight, goofy questions about being a knight, he just shut down.
Shut it down.
He just shut down. He didn't say this is inappropriate, stop asking me. He literally, it was like he was a robot and somebody turned off the off switch. He just shut down and just glared at me. And I was like, okay, back to box trolls. I'm not going to try this anymore.
Back to the more serious business.
We're
of
cool
box
now.
trolls.
I've interviewed him since. We're cool. I apologize. I didn't mean any disrespect.
Yeah.
I was just being, sometimes bits don't work.
I think he takes everything very seriously, which is kind of great when he's in your movie.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I don't know if you might have had more things to worry about, but when he came to do the table read of the film, he showed up and came with his a leather binder with his script. And the table reads at these movies, you want to hear the movie out loud. It's not like this is the moment where you're really going to show everybody exactly what you can do.
Right.
And he showed up to the table read and was off book. he had memorized everything and did not look down at his script for the entire table read. And I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Start memorizing.
Yeah, I gotta.
And this is a prolific performer.
I gotta learn my character's name.
He makes 3-4 movies a year. So to hear that is incredible.
Oh, he was just but it really did kind of raise the game for. It just made us all be like, okay, like if this dude who's been doing this for 40, 50 years is ready to is off book and ready to go, then the rest of us have to be prepared and ready to perform as well.
You guys want to take some questions from the audience?
Yes, please.
Let's do it. Who's first? Hello.
Oh, yeah. Hi. Nick, is there anything you can take away from doing these movies that you can bring back to comedic acting, or is there not a lot of overlap there?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think there's so much. I think the better acted, I think the better acting you have in a comedy moment, the more you can commit fully to whatever is happening in a more comedic scenario, the funnier whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish will be. So I learned so much from all the actors, but specifically being able to watch Oscar and Sir Ben act, you just realize, wow, these guys are so thoughtful about what they're doing, and I think you can apply that to comedy, and I think it makes the comedic moments that much more impactful, as well as just like the staging of things, what Chris was thinking about as far as the blocking of a scene, what he's trying to do just with lighting, or what he's trying to do with the two sides of things, as he would talk about in this particular film. I think that stuff can be applied to comedy and just makes it all that much more interesting and funny.
Great. Thank you. Hi.
So this is for both of you or either of you. I feel like everyone hears stories about the Holocaust growing up. So what's it like to really experience it in the movie?
Well, it's weird. I mean, my dad was a refugee from Germany, but eventually joined the American Army and served in Europe at the end of the war. And then he wrote books about Nazis. So I kind of grew up with all this stuff, and none of the stuff that we were filming was new to me in terms of subject matter. And when you're making a movie, you're like, you just had breakfast, you're wondering what's for lunch, and you're wondering how you're going to get these shots before that time. So it's very interesting to realize that I was doing this in a kind of very business-like way, where you can't be particularly emotional about it, and then later showing it to people who are deeply emotionally affected by it. So in some ways, I wasn't thrown at all, even though it's the documentary footage actually that's incorporated in some of the movie that really gets to you, to see children in camps, to see people with tattoos on their wrists, but that stuff is very off-putting. To see actual footage from the trial, and then to realize how closely we'd approximated those trial scenes, that was really affecting to me.
Yeah, totally.
And we've got one last question. Who's the finale to our finale Q&A?
Hello. So obviously we live in a world today where there's a lot of hateful rhetoric going on, especially from the highest people in our government talking about people of a specific religious group and targeting them with hate speech. And so I was wondering what you hope people will take away from the movie, specifically in context of our world today, and what they can do to make the world a better place.
I think when we went to shoot this, we shot it in Argentina last year. You had probably just headed down there. I was about to head down there, and we're a year out now of the anniversary of Charlottesville. And so I think it was resonating at a higher frequency for me about where we were in our country right now, but not only with Jews, with so many different groups, and that there seems to be a much more of a rhetoric of anti-immigration and just a real sort of push and pull between groups. And I think personally what is going on in this movie largely is people struggling to figure out whether they're going to exact revenge or they're going to exact justice, and trying to figure out how to maneuver within that. And And so I hope that there is a world where people watch the film and they see that like there's ways to punish those who have done wrong, but perhaps it's not with throwing more violence back at it. That there's a way to respond, seeking justice and what is right, but in doing it in a manner that is befitting of hopefully a more peaceful future.
Yeah, we were shooting in Argentina, where in the late 70s and early 80s there was a military dictatorship, and tens of thousands of people were taken from their homes and killed. They were put into camps. They were killed and thrown out of airplanes. And I think the thing to take from the movie and what it's trying to get across is that Germany in the 1930s was not unique. It's uniquely horrible in terms of its size, but that any society in the hands of demagogues who would use ethnic and racial hatred to gain power is under threat of a national catastrophe. And that's and that's AOL Build for today.
That was a great question. That was way better than anything I asked you guys. So thanks for showing me up. You guys, this is great to have you guys.
Thank you so much.
Have you guys here today. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
Nick Kroll. Nick, I'm sorry I didn't have any chicken wings. Next time we'll do this over wings. Chris Weitz, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Operation Finale in theaters August 29th. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Thank you.